Welcome to Notebook 32, Few Shot Prompting. In this notebook, you're going to learn how to provide chat models with instructive examples by way of a technique called few shot prompting. By the time you complete this notebook, you will understand how to perform few shot prompting. You'll observe the effect and limitations of the few shot prompting technique, and you're going to learn a handy method that LangChain provides us with for efficiently creating and editing few shot prompts. Just as a brief aside, the technique few shot prompts has some other names that you're going to run into out in the wild as well. Sometimes you'll see things like one-shot prompting or two-shot prompting or many-shot prompting or one-to-many shot prompting. Just as kind of a hint, anytime you see the phrase shot prompting, you're probably looking at some variation of this technique, with really the primary difference only being how many examples are we going to provide to the model. For the sake of simplicity, and it's common, we're just going to refer to this entire collection of pretty much the same techniques as few shot prompting. Beginning with our imports per usual. Excuse me. We'll have many of the same inputs or imports, with one new addition. We'll be looking at this few shot chat message prompt template later in the workshop. Our chat model instance is going to be the same as it has been throughout the workshop. Okay, so let's talk about few shot prompting. As mentioned, we can provide example human AI interactions as part of our prompts. The intention being to influence the behavior of the model's response. So let's create a simple chain so that we can begin playing around with this idea. So here is a single message prompt where we've basically created a very, very simple prompt template that expects a single human message, where we're going to be providing the prompt at invocation time. We'll use an output parser and create a very simple chain as we've done many times. Now, let's say for some reason, right, and this is definitely a toy example for the sake of instruction, but let's say for some reason we want the model to repeat back to us whatever we say, but in all capital letters. So one thing we could do, knowing what we already know, right, is to invoke our chain using the prompt, repeat back whatever I say to you, but in all capital letters, and then provide some text, hello, okay? So, just to kind of get our point across, here it is, totally worked. Nothing fundamentally wrong with this. And again, this is very much like a convoluted example to help us understand the technique. We're not suggesting that somehow what we're doing right here is exactly how you would tackle this problem in the real world. Okay, so the explicit instruction in our prompt, right? We've learned to be specific in our prompts. We've done that here, and it looks to us, given our goal, that the explicit instruction in our prompt did a sufficient job getting the model to respond as we desired. Let's, however, again, for the sake of exploring the technique, let's try to get the model to behave in the same way, but this time via few shot prompting, which we're going to show an actual example of this now. To do this, instead of relying on giving the model explicit instructions, we're going to extend our prompt template to contain several human AI example interactions. So here, again, using from messages, we're going to create a new prompt template, and you can see we have alternating human AI messages, where in each case, the human is sending in a lowercase piece of text, and we are indicating that the AI message responded with all uppercase. So we do this with hello, we do this with red, we do this with blue, and then finally, we end our prompt template with an actual prompt template where we've templated out part of the prompt that we expect to be passed in at invocation time. So we'll define that prompt template here. We'll create, per usual, a very simple chain using our newly defined prompt template that has these several example interactions. And let's give it a try. So we're going to invoke our chain, and you'll notice when we're invoking our chain, we're simply passing in the word hi. We're not providing any instructions to the model. Let's try it again with the word orange, okay? So it looks, at least in these two examples, that we were able to get the same kind of behavior out of our model. And what's really interesting here is, unlike this prompt up here, where we gave explicit instructions for what we wanted the model to do, in this prompt template, at no point in time did we give any explicit or specific instructions to the model about what it ought to do. Rather, we provided it with a series of example interactions which impacted and influenced the way that it responded to the next prompt that we sent it, right? So, how much these few shot prompt examples actually influence the model? The short answer is we have to test it and see, right? So let's explore this a little bit. Let's say, for example, that we try our chain again, but this time we're going to pass in the prompt NVIDIA. Okay, so this is interesting, right? Because the model still gave us an uppercase phrase, but it did not, let's say, figure out our intention that we wanted it to only mirror back the word that we provided it, right? Rather, it gave us an associated word with an uppercase version of it. And interestingly, GPU is always uppercase, so it's getting a little fuzzy, right? And again, the point of this is we're just exploring a little bit about, in pure isolation, without any explicit instructions, how powerful is this kind of toy technique, this toy example of the technique that we've constructed above. All right? So here we see already it's falling apart a little bit. Okay, and it's also worth mentioning that all of our example shots were single word response examples, right? And every point in our examples, we gave a single word, we gave a single response, et cetera, et cetera. So, what happens if we break, right, the pattern of the examples, and in this case, give it a question, right? So if we invoke it, we shouldn't be too surprised to see that in these prompts that are real departures from the examples we provided, it's not gonna work as we expected whatsoever. In fact, here we have no indication of uppercasing. We have no indication of mirroring back. When we sent this prompt to the model, it's just, the examples we provided it, let's just say for the time being, they just weren't enough to guide the model to do what we expected in this particular context. Okay, so as a bit of an aside, but to kind of summarize, we've introduced few-shot prompting here in isolation, but you need to know that this is purely for the sake of learning the core concepts. But in practice, and we're going to be doing this quite a bit throughout the remainder of the workshop, few-shot prompting is just one of several tools at your disposal when prompting large language models. And typically you're going to be using them in tandem with other techniques, not the least of which is being specific in your main prompt, which we've already covered at great length in this workshop. And furthermore, as you'll see in the next and subsequent notebooks, also utilizing things like the system message. So, for now, right, we're going to continue to explore few-shot prompting in isolation, primarily so you can focus on learning the technique before complicating it with other things. But, I really want you to take away now, even before you see more additional examples, you're most likely going to be using few-shot prompting in conjunction with other prompt engineering techniques that you have and will be learning in this workshop. Okay, so, especially when working with just a few example shots like we've done so far, there's really nothing wrong at all with just hard coding our few-shot prompts into a prompt template like we did above. In fact, at least in my experience, this is typically what we do, right? But sometimes, we very well might wish to either use or try out different combinations of examples, of few-shot examples, but with a static base prompt. Or we might want to ingest user AI shot examples from data. And in scenarios like these, we can use another helper that LangChain gives us called few-shot chat message prompt template to assist us. Okay, so this is going to be another example of where we can parameterize, right, components of our chains for better reuse in the long run. Okay, so let's just imagine, right, that we want to construct a prompt that generates information about a given city. However, we want to be very specific about the format of the information that the model generates. So this might seem like a good use case for using few-shot prompting. So, the end prompt we have in mind might look something like the following. All right, we're going to have a human prompt template for a human to invoke with a city name. And we'll look at that here. It says provide information about the following city in exactly the same format as you've done in the previous responses. And then we're going to parameterize this city property here. However, we're saying in our main prompt exactly as we've done in previous responses. So let's imagine that we have some few-shot prompt examples here. Now, in the current situation, we don't know of a way to simply provide this in as a single value, right? We only know how to provide a list of 2 tuples, okay? But let's imagine that we want to be able to have a single few-shot prompt value here, and furthermore, that we can abstract it so that we can provide different actual literals for a few-shot prompt, okay? So we're going to look at how to do that now. For the time being, we're commenting this out just to make clear what we want to be able to do. Okay, so whether we author them ourselves, maybe we obtain them from an external data source, maybe we get a large language model to generate them for us. What we can do is construct a list, right, of human AI interaction examples that we want in our few-shot prompt template. So here, what we're going to do is create a list of city examples, and you can see in our situation, we're going to create dictionaries. Each one is going to have a city, and each one is going to have a desired output. You can see that we're using a very consistent but specific format where we have the city name, the country, the continent, and the planet. And we've provided 4 examples, each with a city and each with an output. The keys for this dictionary, city and output, are arbitrary. We just came up with these ourselves. Since each item in our city example's location is intended to represent a human message and an AI message, it makes sense that next, if we wanted, we could construct a prompt template that represents a single one of these examples. Okay, so here we're going to create a prompt template using chat prompt template from messages, and we're going to have a list of 2 messages, a human message and an AI message. And here we're going to map our parameters to be the same as the keys in our examples dictionary. So now that we have our examples and we also have our prompt template for a single example, with those 2 preliminary steps out of the way, we can now use LangChain's few-shot chat message prompt template to construct a few-shot prompt out of all of our examples. So Few-shot chat message prompt template expects two arguments. One is an examples argument, which should be a list of dictionaries, which ostensibly contains our examples. And the second argument it expects is example prompt, which is the prompt template used to render one of our examples into human and AI messages. So here we're going to invoke few-shot chat message prompt template. We're going to pass in as examples our dictionary of examples. We're going to pass in as example prompt our prompt template that can render one of these examples. Okay. And just like many other things in LangChain, this few-shot prompt that we've defined here is runnable. So, just like any other prompt template, we can invoke it. Here we're going to invoke it, passing it basically a blank object and look at the messages. And you can see that under the hood, we now have a human message, an AI message, a human message, an AI message, etc. And it's constructed our human messages and AI messages out of this examples dictionary. Okay. So again, if you're with me, you probably feel so far at least that like, oh, this is just a lot of additional work. Why are we doing this? But you're going to see further down why sometimes it might make sense to make this approach when the actual content of your examples, you might want to be able to swap them in for something else. Okay, so stick with me. Its usefulness will become apparent here in just a little bit. Okay, so with few-shot prompt now defined, we can revisit our main city info prompt template from above. But instead of having this commented out, right, we can actually provide few-shot prompt right here in this position. And then now with this few-shot prompt here, right, again, from messages expects a list of two tuples. We can see that few-shot prompt, when we invoke it, is in fact a list that could be two tuples, but it looks like LangChain is using the human message, AI message classes, as we also talked about in the previous notebook, right? But basically, you can imagine if we expand few-shot prompt, it makes sense that it would reside as in this position of our chat prompt template. And then we're going to provide the final message as a human message, which specifies what we want the model to do with our incoming prompt, parameterizing the value city. And having done that, we can create now a chain per usual. Just for this example, we're going to write down a list of cities and batch it into our chain. And you can see in each situation for New York, London, Tokyo, etc., just given those examples and given this rather abstract prompt to provide information about the following city in exactly the same format as you've done in previous responses, right? We can see that the model successfully did this with all of them, following the exact format we gave examples for. Okay, so again, this might seem like a lot of effort, but let's do a quick exercise to start to show you why at times this amount of effort might really be worth it, right? So we have a chain from above, and in fact, from here to here to here to here, right? This is exactly what we just did above, right? We created our few-shot chat messages prompt template using our examples in our example prompt. We used our few-shot prompt as part of our main prompt template. We created a chain and we batched it to cities. Okay, so from here and here and here and here, these four cells are what we've already done. But now the goal is, okay, is that instead of having our model give us a specific output, right, for a specifically formatted output about the location of the city, instead we want the model to provide us with slogans for each of the city. Okay, so we have here a new dictionary that you haven't seen yet in this notebook, which is a dictionary of example slogans for a given city, right? So your job is to refactor this chain here, right, these four cells, but as little as possible, right, as little as possible to try to get the model to generate responses based on these examples, okay? So again, this should be a very small amount of work. You might have to just look around and think through it. It's a good time, since there are several moving parts to this technique, to kind of solidify and be sure you understand like which parts go where and how it all fits together. But the exercise itself is pretty straightforward. Please pause the video, give yourself some time to kind of wrap your head around this technique, make as little modification as you can, and get the model to give you responses on our list of cities in batch based on these new examples. Then come back, start the video, we'll look at a solution together. Okay, good luck. Okay, hopefully after you spend some time getting familiar with this technique, this solution that we show you will be very straightforward. Okay, so the only change we made here, there's one and only one, is that in our few-shot prompt, we gave it a different set of examples. That's it, right? Everything else is exactly the same. Our base prompt is exactly the same. Our chaining of it is exactly the same, but now we can batch our cities, and you can see that we're getting these kind of pithy little slogans about the cities. Okay, so the point being, this is a little bit of a more I won't say complicated, but there's several steps for this particular technique, but you're likely going to find yourself in situations at some point where you really want to continue to use the same base prompt, but easily be able to swap out examples, right, without manually having to delete the examples and type them back in exactly the same place, right? You want to be able to provide different kinds of examples as inputs to a larger chain, and this is a technique that's going to allow you to do that rather elegantly. Okay. Okay, so in this notebook, using human and AI messages, you were able to compose example interactions that impacted the behavior of your large language model. Again, few shot prompting. In the next notebook, we're going to learn about a third message type that's called system message, and we're going to use it to establish an overarching persona and role for the chat message. Using the system message is incredible, so I look forward to seeing you in the next notebook where we'll explore its use. Okay, see you then.